Hey yo, it's your boy Angel Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew for a very special installment of our videos. We have Anthony Spiggs and we have Dean, Alpha Dean, as you all know. And today we are doing an interview with Cypher Speak, and we have the lovely Troy Pichelman, Troy Pichelman, and the lovely Darcy Ross. And
hello,
Dean,
everybody.
Hello.
What do we have in store today, Dean?
Well, today we're gonna, like I say, we're gonna talk to those wondrous people of Cypher Speak, and I like to say the magnanimous Troy and the wonderful Darcy. These guys have over 45 episodes and counting of Cypher Speak, which is awesome. They provide advice on gaming, game mastering, information about all the hot topics involving the gaming industry, but especially the MCG. These guys are awesome. I listen to their show all the time. And yeah, so let's jump right in. Anthony, I think you have a question for these guys.
Yeah, first off, hi guys. And everyone on the server knows I like to affectionately call you guys the peanut butter and chocolate of gaming podcasts. You're like the, perfect combination. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I honestly have said that about you guys on multiple occasions. So I guess my first question is how did you guys meet, and what got you into podcasting in the first place?
Oh, goodness. Troy?
I think we sort of knew each other on the internet a little bit through Twitter and things like that, and we were kind of tangentially aware of each other. And then I hatched an evil plot at Gen Con a few years ago. I was running games for MCG, and Darcy was running games for MCG. So I had access to which people were GMing at which times for MCG, and me and my friends signed up for Darcy's game. and that's actually how we met in person. And then we solidified our friendship with a 4-hour car ride to Michigan for a little, there was a Cypher Con, 20 people, Darcy?
Yeah. Yeah. Grand Rapids Intrusion.
Yes, GR Intrusion, that's right.
I still have my little name tag from our 20-person con that we went to. So we had a long, I feel like we've had a couple of nice long car rides together over our friendship, but I think that definitely solidified it, playing games together.
Yep.
And who came up with the idea to have a podcast?
I don't know which one of us came up with the idea.
I mean, I think there was some manic podcast planning at Grand Rapids Intrusion, possibly maybe a little later. I remember a manic late night hotel room session with me and John Harness, my current roommate, who's also active in the Cypher community, and nothing ever came of it. But somehow Troy and I got talking, and this podcast idea was something I wanted to do because, in the earlier days of the Cypher community, there were fewer of us and fewer places to go flutter around other people who loved these games as much as I did. And so I was hungry for places to kind of talk about it. So I, there was it was the GM Intrusions podcast. I sort of got to guest on once, and I was like, I love talking about games. It's all I want to do. And so I think I was, barking up the podcast trees for a while. And I forget exactly how it came together, Troy, but maybe it was at a Gen Con we were talking about it.
I know. I think it was actually before a Gen Con. It was just middle of the summer or maybe late spring. And now I think I remember what the genesis of it was.
Okay, tell me.
So I think it was a light bulb a little bit that went off in my head, right? I knew that Darcy had wanted to podcast and had yet to get her podcast off the ground. In fact, I actually was on an episode of her never released podcast that she recorded at my house.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was really bad. I mean, not because of you, because of me.
Just in general, we had one Yeti microphone on a table in front of 3 of us. So you can imagine how great that audio was.
Yep.
See, that's one of the 10 lost episodes.
Yeah, we need that in the public eye right there.
That's for sure.
Yeah, we need that.
But up until that point, I had mostly listened to interview shows and actual plays, and I'm like, oh man, I could never do that. And then I started listening to Pandas Talking Games with Phil and Senda.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, that's just two people talking about games. Darcy wants to do a podcast. There aren't any Cypher podcasts out there at the time. There are a few now, handful.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, Darcy, I'm going to pitch this idea to you. What do you think? And
then we took it to Gen Con, talked to Charles about it, and our little podcast baby was born.
Yeah. Right after Gen Con, I think we recorded our first episode.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure everyone's so happy that you guys did, because we truly enjoy your show. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we like doing it. It's a good way to keep in touch during our busy times.
Yeah, that is that's my secret to staying in touch with Darcy, is do a podcast with her and make her feel obligated to hang out with you.
Yep, it's very effective.
We have to talk at so-and-so time. It needs to be done.
Yep.
Let's move it on right along to the next question. So, guys, with over 44 episodes under your belts, what are your secrets for coming up with new and interesting topics to discuss? And do you ever plan to go back and talk about old topics in new videos?
Ooh, these are good questions. Especially with the slew of new content coming out of MCG, there's sort of almost too much to cover, which is why I'm very grateful there are more people like you guys talking about Cypher, because there's just too much content for any one group of people sort of trying to discuss and give advice about it for any one person to cover. So I think, one thing we try to do a little bit is like vary the sort of alternate between kind of advice-y podcasts and like diving into kind of setting or fluff or lore episodes. Sometimes we like to like go into a cool setting or a cool recursion and give ideas on how to use it, because there's so much great fluff in all these books, right? These cool locations and people and like recursions and even the different Cypher system worlds. So I think it's worth like I really like switching between, hey, here's all this cool stuff in a part of the lore that you may not have read and how to use it or how to use bits of it in your game. And then also diving a little bit into the mechanics or more like GM advice to the extent that Cypher can be called the crunchy ends. So we try to alternate those on occasion. What else would you say, Troy, about that?
My favorite show topic generator is Darcy needs help with something.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
So, like, one of the biggest ones that comes to mind, I think, is when we did our boss monster episode.
I needed it so bad.
Darcy's like, "Hey, I need to figure out how to do a boss monster. Can we talk about boss monsters in Cypher?"
In the podcast we recorded today, I wrote show notes for it, which I have been slacking in. So coming back to being useful on the podcast. But I don't know if you saw that, Troy. There were like two sections at the end where I was like, Troy, you better have something for these, because like these are questions I have, because like
sure,
running. And I think it helps that we like, Troy and I sync up on a lot of levels, but we do have some pretty big differences in experience and like what we tend to run and how we run.
Yep.
And so like I always feel like I learn so much from our discussions in each of the episodes. So even when I'm not like bringing a topic that I have nothing to say about on, which occasionally happens, even when I think I know what I'm talking about, I always feel like we come up with something that I never would have thought of if we hadn't been talking about it.
Peanut butter and chocolate. I'm telling you guys. Peanut butter and chocolate.
I'm into, it's been a good recipe for us.
Nice.
In terms of returning to things, what do you think about that, Troy?
I don't know. At this point, we really haven't talked about returning to things. It's not, I don't know that we're opposed to it, but I guess, we just kind of think about, new things that we can get out there and say, but if they're like, I think that the thing that would most like entice me to return to something is if, somebody, listened to one of the episodes and are like, hey, I was listening to your, XP episode. Have you thought about doing this with XP?
Right.
And we'd be like, oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. Like, hey, let's mine a couple other ideas that maybe we didn't have back then and go and do that. So I think if something sparked us to go back, or, if MCG, releases, something that kind of really changes something we've done, I think we'd go back and definitely revisit it.
Yeah, we've talked about kind of like followers before, and that was a little, that was when the predation rules were out, but not when the destiny rules were out. So we, there are some like interesting mechanical changes, especially now that we're getting like the sort of revised editions of like the Cypher System rulebook is bringing character arcs in. I know we talked about character arcs in one of our episodes, so it'll be kind of cool to see how MCG implements that for Cypher System. And I could see myself returning to that topic, but like Troy said, I think we're always hungry to touch as many of these topics as we can. So we'll probably like have it branch out rather than do we'll probably have like a different spin on it or a different angle. There's just so much stuff to talk about.
Yep. And I'd say the other thing is, we love hearing what other people want us to talk about, right? Yes. Like, if there's ideas out there for, what kind of stuff, settings or games or mashups or whatever that other people want to hear about, that's one of our favorite things, is to kind of get inspired by some of listener ideas.
And we've pulled ideas from people who get it to us on Twitter, and I love that we have the Cypher Speak channel in the Cypher Unlimited Discord. Yep. That has been really cool to see what people are vibing off of and what they want to see more of. So like that makes me so happy. There's like a nice little hub for it now.
Yep.
Well, we want to be the one stop for all things Cypher. If we have to.
You are.
So very happy to help.
Well,
I have a question too. We got some people out there, us included, who like, do podcasts and, anything that's, out there social wise. What kind of advice would you give them, or if there's anything to avoid or anything like that?
Ooh, people who might want to start their own podcast, do you mean?
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Ooh, get yourself a Troy. Ideally, get yourself a Troy. That was my step one to make the podcast happen. Get Darcy's sister to edit it, because you're not going to if you're me, or not going to very efficiently. No, but I guess in all honesty, like I certainly really appreciate having, like I really like my and Troy's dynamic in terms of Troy's, like we pick up. I think I like how we both contribute and cover different things, and like it definitely getting to work with Troy is like just makes the whole it makes it so fun instead of ever being work, right? So that's a huge perk for me, because I tend to like take on projects that then become this slew of work for me, and this podcast has always remained fun. So like finding a great partner, I think, is one thing that I would suggest. What about you, Troy?
I think, for me, it's, if you're starting one of these things, it's kind of like Darcy mentioned, be aware of the unintended costs, maybe is a good way to think about it, you just don't consider like how long it's going to take to edit an episode, or, to record an episode in some cases, right? And every person that I've heard that's kind of made this statement of, oh, we're just going to do a short podcast. Yeah. Like, we wanted our podcast to be like 15, 20 minutes. Yeah. We very rarely are under 30.
I'm sorry, Troy. I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you because
we're laughing at ourselves.
I understand.
That's every episode we feel.
That. We're gonna make a 30-minute. We're gonna do a 30-minute episode.
Yeah. 2 hours later.
Another thing I might suggest is that like the podcasting community is full of really cool people who have made all the podcasting mistakes and would like to help you not make those mistakes. So I would say, if you're thinking about, making a podcast, even making a stream, right? Come talk to someone, come talk to someone and find other people who seem to be doing things you like, and see if they have some advice for you. One thing we did that early on was kind of cool is, I kind of got into this community of podcasters, and we all kind of shared around some of our like editing protocols one time. Of course, the scientist calls it editing protocols. Everyone else calls it the stuff I do when I edit, and like I'm just a nerd about it. And so it was really helpful to sort of see what other people's processes were, because we're all like, using rubber gum and glue to like to sort of get everything together. So like learn from each other, reach out, have a community of people to help. And like we were really lucky that Misdirected Mark kind of found out that we were thinking about doing a podcast early on. We're like, we will host you. And so, and you know, I wasn't sure if our podcast was going to be any good. I'm still not. But so I was like, I don't know if you want to take us on yet. And they were like, we want to take you on. And having a podcast network has been really helpful, especially in the early days when we just had no idea what we were doing. And they were like really there for us. So like finding community is a big thing I'd recommend.
Yeah.
Nice.
Come talk to us. We're available.
Yeah. You definitely will give any advice that we have or point you in direction of much more knowledgeable people than us.
Same with streaming too. Like don't be afraid. I think there's less of like a tight knit community in streaming, as far as I can tell. But there's, as I'm sure you folks know, there's all sorts of weird stuff that can go wrong when you first start streaming. And I would love it if you didn't have to go through the mistakes that I made. So.
Yeah, that is so awesome. First off, I want to say that I am so making Get Yourself a Troy t-shirt for Gen Con. And
I will buy that shirt. A whole wardrobe full of them.
But now with, you know, Darcy becoming an official member of the Monte Cook Games team, you know, Mrs. Community Relations Coordinator here, I guess how did that affect the Cypher Speak dynamic? And, you know, were there any benefits or hindrances to Cypher Speak because of it?
Troy?
One of the hindrances has been, Darcy's time gets stretched a little thin on occasion. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that would have been any different if she wasn't an MCG person. Darcy is pretty good at stretching herself pretty thin.
Yep, that's a superpower. My focus.
But really outside of that, I don't know. It's definitely been a benefit in that we have a little tiny window of access. I guess I will dispel the myth for everyone if they think that we have a treasure trove of information that we just are sitting on waiting to share as soon as it comes out.
Troy was so disappointed to find that I knew nothing.
It's like, Darcy, what's coming up next? I know we have a Kickstarter in 5 weeks. I have no idea what it is. Thanks, Darcy.
It's not that bad, but it's often like something is happening in 5 weeks and I don't know about it or don't realize it's coming that soon. I'm always like, what's happening this week? That's the window of secrecy that I can get you. And it's not that MCG doesn't tell me. I think they just don't realize how clueless I leave myself, which is great. I can never spoil anything. So.
No, very true. No, but I mean, it's definitely right. It gives us a little bit of, for instance, right? We had the episode on crafting, and we had a question that we couldn't quite figure out how it was supposed to work.
Yeah.
And right after the episode, Darcy, sent a thing off to Bruce, and Bruce got back to us, pretty quickly, so we can put in the show notes that, hey, this is a little thing that we, got a little bit wrong in the episode, and it was just, so we have a little bit of an in from a communication perspective.
I was kind of
Darcy,
outside of that.
Darcy, you made a great statement, and I have to turn that. You have to use that on one of your Cyphercasts, because it's like you said you were clueless, so you should be the clueless employee who spoils nothing.
Oh,
yeah,
nice. I like that.
Great at that job.
That's good.
I guess one thing I was worried about was and we talked to, and I asked MCG, I was like, hey, I have this Cypher Speak podcast, like, is that okay? Is that a thing I can do now that I'm hired? They're like, whatever, you do you, Darcy. They're lovely and they're great and really supportive of all my weird projects. But I was like, are there, and they basically didn't, give me any stipulations about having to run the podcast differently or, obviously don't spoil anything that I'm not allowed to spoil. And I usually don't know anything, so it's fine. But I was kind of worried that you know, I love the Cypher system. It is my favorite. I love everything that MCG has made for so long. But I was worried, like, oh, what if I do have something kind of negative to say? Like, is it okay if I have a critique? Like, is it weird now that I work for MCG? And basically, the MCG team was like, no, your opinions are your own. It's all good. And fortunately, like, the design ethos and what MCG does and how they create is just so in line with what I like that, like, it's never come up as a problem where I'm like, I don't like this thing. And so I have to keep it, deep in my secret heart and let it fester. It's just really never come up. And I'm really grateful. When I was first learning all the new stuff that came in Numenera Destiny and Discovery, like, it was a bunch of new mechanics. I was like, when we got to the crafting and salvaging, I was like, I was really nervous. I was like, what if I don't like it? What if MCG made a thing I don't like? And then I loved it. So it was fine.
So yeah, just keep it moving along. Got a question, another question for you guys. So you guys have covered basically most of Monte Cook Games settings in your episodes. Are there any episodes that any settings that you wish you could talk more on? And piggybacking off that, what's your favorite setting to run and or play of the Monte Cook Game settings?
To run and or play is pretty easy for me. I still love Numenera. I always go back to Numenera, and I think it's still my favorite playground to play around in. Just so many things to do there and to poke at and to play around in. And I think that's still the place that I would gravitate back towards playing. Like, if I had to choose one, I think that would be the one for me.
Probably for me too. I got a tattoo and everything. I'm obligated, but Numenera is my deep love. But like, I also, I get to play Numenera a little more than a lot of the other ones. I'll run a Numenera one shot here and there, and so, like, I really would like to get to play a little more of the Strange, because I think I'd love to get to play to see how that feels in kind of more of a campaign, like a short campaign. I've run a really tiny campaign, but like, how you hop in and out of different recursions and like see that over more long term. I'd love to get a chance to do that. And of course, like, Predation is full of dinosaurs, and so my heart breaks that I have not, gotten to really live in that longer yet. So, like, Predation, The Strange are definitely ones that I wish I could get more time with. So,
from a podcast perspective, I think I think that The Strange is a good one. I think that because of the recursions and all of the different stuff there, right? We just went back to there with R639, and that was fun. It's a really good one to talk about a lot of the different recursions. Like, I kind of feel like we could never run out of recursions to talk about,
right.
And there's a lot of really interesting ones. A little story about recursions is, we wanted to do a episode on recursions. This is way back in one of our earlier episodes. And Darcy's like, let's do the Baker Street recursion. And I'm like, okay. And then I look it up, and it's like 2 paragraphs. Like, it's like really nothing to it in the.
And I'd really upsold it. I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna have all this. Let's like each go home and read. And, like, let's go do the work.
Write some notes down.
You just pick it up in 2 paragraphs.
But in my head, it was this whole section.
Yeah, but it was a good episode. I really like that episode. It's really good.
And I think what's fun about recursions is that, like, it's like, it could be, you could have a whole Cypher system game set in that, not as a recursion too, right? It's a chance to like look at all the different kinds of stories and settings you can play in with the Cypher system. So I think it's relevant to people who aren't as interested in the Strange, because it's like, how do we play Moriarty and some Sherlock Holmes in the Cypher system? So
for sure.
Yeah, when someone asks for a book recommendation, I always recommend Worlds Numberless and Strange.
It's so good.
You basically, it's 200 different settings.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And like I said, for me, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Cypher system, Numenera, The Strange, no matter which one it is. I don't think I think most people miss that everything is done in broad strokes. You know, it gives you enough information for the world to be grand, but you fill in the blanks. You know, I've always loved that. I've always loved, you know, back when I first started playing D&D, we had Castle Greyhawk. Castle Greyhawk was in everybody's world. Everybody. But everybody's world was different. There were just certain things that you knew were going to be there, like Castle Greyhawk, you know, or, you know, somebody was going to say something about Bigby or Mordekainen. You know, those were staples. But the worlds were always vast, varied, and wonderful. And like I tell everybody, MCG brought that back. They brought that wonder back, that creativity, and it brought it to the table for us.
And that open space, I think you totally hit exactly how it feels for me, is like enough stuff that I'm inspired, and I have like, I don't feel like I'm having to invent everything from whole cloth. Tons of stuff to grab and go, but room for my own spin on everything, room for space for the players to do what they want. That it really hits my Goldilocks zone of information as well.
That's what I mean. You know, the steadfast for Numenera, the estate for the Strange. You know, you have staples that everybody understands, but you know. So speaking on that, I do have a question for you guys. Your best game ever has funded, of course. You know, you knew we were going to bring this up. So, which of the settings that are coming, you know, which one are you most excited for?
How dare you ask my favorite unborn child? I know my answer. Do you know yours?
Go ahead. I have to think about it for a second.
I mean, maybe it's my answer because it's the first one, and I'm like just so hyped for it right now. But you know, I have this obsession with playing more RPGs that are set in space. You know, I have all of this cool space media that I love. You know, I love Mass Effect. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. They're all really different takes on space games, but they've like, I get like weepy when I think about space. I just really like it a lot. And the visuals are so cool, right? And so many, anyway, there's lots of reasons I like space. Different interview question. So I'm really excited for a whole book that's, you know, it's about a whole sci-fi toolkit and campaign setting. It's going to be written by Bruce Cordell. So this is The Stars Are Fire. It's going to be happening, I think, at the end of this year. So excited. And like, one thing I've already talked to Bruce about, because I was watching Star Trek, is like, I love when there are these big epic ideas you're dealing with. You're out in space, you know, things are big and vast and huge, but I love when stories can have these little moments between characters. You know, two characters are, you know, oh, the ship's engine is falling apart and war and chaos, but two characters are like, have some sort of personal issue between themselves, and they go to the holodeck and they play some pool, and they like kind of negotiate. They have this little moment, right? And so I definitely was like mentioning that in the Slack, and Bruce was like, well, maybe there could be a section on like how to find these tender little moments that Darcy's desperate for in your space Cypher games. So it has not been promised to me that my dream will come true in that book, but it has been brought to Bruce's attention. So fingers crossed. Tender moments in the vastness of space. Well, my TED Talk.
Well, before you answer, Troy, and just so you know, Darcy, superheroes in outer space. I'm out there to you right now.
I want it. I need it.
There you go. Play your Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Yes. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to Stars Are Fire as well. But I think I'm looking forward to Godforsaken the most. You know, fantasy is where a lot of us started. You know, and I sort of have this idea that someday I will do, as if you've probably heard on the podcast, where I want to run Dragonlance in Cypher. You know, Dragonlance is kind of my first D&D setting that I played a lot of, you know, and read those books and all that stuff. And so I have a lot of fond memories of that. So yeah, I think for me, it's Godforsaken, whether to run godforsaken itself, or to kind of use that, as a gateway to run, some of those kind of classic D&D stuff, from a Cypher perspective.
And you've got all those cool maps and stuff. So like all the books you have are like, it's going to be nice to port that straight to Cypher. And
I would definitely love to play some Dragonlance. That was one of my first settings as well. So that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But it's funny we asked this question because we all have different answers, because no one said zombies, because that's what I want. I want zombies.
I was hoping he was going to say horror. That was my runner-up.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for that one too. I'm a huge fan of horror stuff, and I'm very excited that Pre-Written Adventure was just published on Drive-Thru RPG. I think Megan Tolentino just put it out, and hopefully somebody will run that on a video or a stream or something.
I'm planning to contact her this week, because I'm probably going to run it on the server.
Oh my gosh!
You should get that recorded.
I'll be honest with you. For me though, it's crazy. I'm excited for all of them.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get my fingers. I just can't wait to get my hands on all.
Get a
of
load
them.
of this politician over here.
I have no favorites.
Yeah, All Mad here looks so good, and I love that cover art. All
the art is fantastic.
The art is phenomenal for that.
Isn't it
Whoever,
cool?
I mean, MCG always has great art, but
We're super lucky to work with awesome artists.
but I don't know whoever came up with the concept for those covers.
That might have all been
great.
Bear. I'll have to ask.
Yeah.
Those tell Bear, Bear, the art director. When we get him on a show.
Yeah.
That
Oh
was
gosh,
probably-
yeah.
That was some of the most brilliant work I've seen in a long time, because it's just, it evokes what role playing is. Those silhouettes and then that image, and you're like, yeah, I can't wait.
Gosh. I'm hoping it was Bear who did it, because I'm nervous that I'm misrepresenting an artist. But I'll give it for if I find out who did it wasn't Bear, I'll put it in the YouTube comments.
All right, so first off,
you ready for rapid fire questions?
No, I still have one more question to ask, Dean.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Jumping the gun.
But before that, next year, Gen Con, Troy, you got to run me some Dragonlance Cypher system. Make it happen.
we'll see what we can do.
All right, but since it's new GM month, and we haven't mentioned that yet, any advice you have for our viewers and members on the CU that are taking the plunge into GMing for the first time? And here's a two-part question: what was your first experience in the GM chair like?
My first GM experience was Numenera, right? I was at Gen Con. I went there hoping to try out a couple new games. It was the first year Numenera was there. It was its launch, and I had like a god touchdown and opened a single chair in one of the games to sign up for. And so I snuck my way into a Numenera game, and I fell absolutely head over heels in love. Unsurprisingly, went and got the core book, and the core book is so good. But I realized like no one will run this for you. Like the only way you get to play this is by running it yourself. So I was like, okay, I'll learn. And so my first session was for a couple close friends who I knew were going to be really gentle with me. And I prepped so much over it. I think I tried to run the Beal of Borogal in the back of the first core book. And I was like, had all this like weird stuff and notes, and I just remember like being like surrounded by weird stuff as I tried to be like the most prepared in my little GM corner. And I remember like physically shaking. I was so nervous, and like just pounding water because I was just like so scared. And it was rough, right? Like I was like sweating bullets, and I was shaking a little bit, and I didn't know what I was doing, but everybody was like, smiling and playing along. And so I think it ended up going just fine. And I was also teaching all of them the system for the first time. So, and I think I like left the game session and I didn't use any GM intrusions. There was some other stuff that I just like totally forgot to do, but the game runs pretty fine, even when you don't engage with certain parts of it. So it definitely like that first session, like I'm glad I ran it for like really trusted friends. That's a thing that I would like recommend to people is like, having a good group, having a kind group that is not going to be mean to you if you mess up. Like that was really helpful for me. And And yeah, like the other thing I would say is I've seen a lot of first-time GMs use the Cypher system. I've gotten to be a lot of the like a player in a lot of new people's, first jamming experience, and I love that. First of all, that's like makes me the happiest. And so, like a skill that you don't have yet when you first start jamming is evaluating whether your players are having fun. That is a skill that you get. So a lot of people I've seen people like leave their first session and they're really sad because they think they did a bad job, and all the players loved it. But like, if you're not running a really funny game where people are laughing out loud, it can be hard to tell if people are like into it. And so I would say my 2 pieces of advice are get a great group that will love you even if you mess up, because you'll mess up and that's part of the experience. It's great. And 2, ask your players, hey, like, what did you like about the session? And if you're ready for it, what's a thing I could have done a little better? A rose and a thorn. Ask for that. What did I do good? Because you did good stuff, I promise. And so like find that out, because then it will give you the encouragement to like go on and run another game. So that's my advice. What about you, Troy?
So for me, my first time GMing probably was when I was like 13. And it would have been D&D, and I'm sure it was terrible. I probably like TPK'd my party with kobolds or something, or a dragon flew in and they were like first level. I'm sure that's the kind of things that happened when we were 13-year-olds playing Dungeons and Dragons. Absolutely. I don't remember exactly what happened in that first session, but I'm sure it was something like that. Or like they just wandered around town for 2 hours. It was one of those kind of options. I'm sure that's what happened. As far as new GMs, kind of as Darcy alluded to, and shameless plug, we actually just recorded an episode on prep. And but to give everybody a spoiler, sort of what we got to at the end is the most important advice we can give you about prep is prep enough to be confident.
Yeah.
Right. So as a new GM, if you need to have everything written down and you need to have like, your minority report, display of note cards all around you, that's fine. If that's what you need, that's what you need. Go ahead and do that. But if you need a couple of note cards and then you feel good about yourself, don't feel like you're not going to run a good game because you're not prepared. If you feel confident with that kind of prep, great. That's the prep that you need. And then I think my other, and that's kind of a general, regardless of what game you're running.
Right.
And, if you're running a Cypher game, beyond what Darcy said, try to run something that you are at least a little bit familiar from a genre perspective, right? The more familiar you are with like the tropes and the stories and the things kind of in that genre. So whether that's fantasy, which can be in Numenera or Arden and the Strange, or, just some kind of, high fantasy setting, or maybe you're like a horror movie buff, right? And you want to run a horror game, like that's totally cool, or superheroes or whatever it is. Just pick something that you're kind of comfortable with the genre, because then, if you get stuck from a story perspective, it's really easy for you to fall back on tropes that you've seen in movies or TV or all this media that you've watched or read. Yeah,
that's a great point.
That's all excellent advice, man. Yo, guys, mental note, we got to get ourselves a Troy. Find us a Troy. We got to get us a Troy.
Well, Anthony, you're my Troy, quite honestly.
Honestly, I was about to tell you, I'm actually in a good position because my Troy's name is Anthony and my Darcy's sister's name is Al. So
yeah, see, you guys are all set.
All right, so this is we nearing the end of our interview here, and every time we have guests for interviews, we have these 9 rapid fire questions that we're gonna ask you guys. Are you ready?
Is this like the Newlywed Game where we have to?
It's a one. Yeah. Oh, we could do that. It's a one-word answer.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'll start it off, and then Al and Dean will follow through. But first question, I think I know the answer to this one: player or GM?
GM.
So pull punches or go for that TPK?
Pull punches.
BBK.
Online or face-to-face gaming?
Oh, face-to-face.
Face-to-face, but I do love me some online gaming.
Announce the difficulty number or keep it secret?
Secret. Keep it secret, keep it safe.
Yeah, I'm secret.
So, salty or sweet snacks at the gaming table?
Ooh.
Sweet.
Salty.
Oh, peanut butter chocolate. I'm telling you guys.
RP, combat, or a good mix of both?
RP, but only because I'm not very good at combat yet. I like the mix. I just am better at RP.
I like both.
Nice.
PDFs or physical books?
Physical.
Physical.
And GM screen or open rolls on the table?
Ooh. Open rolls, but sending players secrets on note cards.
Ninja notes.
Yeah.
GM screen.
Nice.
Pre-written adventures or original content?
Pre-written.
Original.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
A man of my own heart.
Me too.
And but yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you guys so much for being on with us. We really appreciate it. And it's fantastic hearing your perspective on these things, and hopefully our audience will enjoy them as well.
Thank you.
And so if our audience wanted to reach out and find you guys, how do we do that? Like Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, whatever have you. Like, what's the best way to find out what's going on in your minds?
Well, the best way to reach me is to start a podcast with me. But barring that, I'm findable. I'm very active on Twitter, so at Darcy L. Ross. You can find me on Google Plus and several other places with that handle. I lurk in the Cypher Unlimited, and I tend to go hard for a few days, and then I'm quiet, and then I'll come back. So, but I'm always pingable here. And of course, you can find the Cypher Speak podcast, and you can talk to us collectively by tweeting us at Cypher Speak Pod, or cypherspeakpod@gmail.com, right?
Yep, correct.
Okay.
We will add all that information down below.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah.
And Troy?
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me, Twitter is generally the best at TroyP23 on Twitter. I'm occasionally on the Discord, so you might see me there if I happen to pop around. But that's about the only two places that I am with any frequency.
He can
right
be
now,
summoned
so.
by smoked cheeses.
Yeah.
The Wisconsin artifacts can bring him about.
Yeah, I mean, we have some board game weekends in Wisconsin, so just come and talk to me in person. We just have some board games at my house for a weekend, so that's another good way.
Just show up there.
Yeah,
Just show up.
Address.
That'll be in the show notes below.
We put Troy's address in the show notes.
His phone number, his credit card number, all that information
Social
you'll need.
security number.
Yeah, just might as well. Why not?
If anybody saw GM Roulette, his Netflix account.
So good.
But yeah, again, thanks again. And all you viewers, be sure to like, share, subscribe. Check out the description for all that information about where to reach these guys. And any final thoughts, fellas?
Yeah, I just want to say a personal thank you to Troy and Darcy. One, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And two, for always promoting the CU. You really didn't have to. We're a bunch of nobodies that just jumped on the scene. And, I truly appreciate everything you guys do for us on the CU. And we love you guys.
And, my final thoughts are just like I said before. The magnanimous Troy. He's so calm and unassuming, but such a big personality. Love it. I remember when I first met you, the first time I met you face to face, and you started talking, it was the voice. And I couldn't figure out because you're just so cool, but it was the voice, And Darcy, the first time I met Darcy face to face, it was even funnier because I don't even understand how she knew who I was. I'm just the guy. Oh, I know who you are. I'm like, oh, what did I do? You know, I'm like, did I,
Know who you are.
you know, it's like
I'm with the IRS.
Yeah.
yeah, you know, I'm like, did I do something? I mean, you know, but it was really cool. You know, you guys are great. You know, so yes, the magnanimous Troy and the wonderful Darcy. You guys, you know, continue to do what you do, and you know, continue to inspire us.
And I'm just saying, we need a Cypher Speak game on the server.
Ooh.
Make it happen. Make it happen.
Yes.
Darcy,
You can make it happen.
You asked me for a Supers game.
I did. I still want that.
I will run you a Supers game in space on the server.
Do it.
And I'm gonna advertise Troy's Dragonlance game as soon as I get off.
There we go.
Yes.
You know, pick it.
But yeah, this has been a fantastic talk. Thank you all again, viewers and you Cypher Speak fellows. And from us at the CU, we will see you later.
Bye.